So let's talk about Christopher Columbus. When you hear that name, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that image we got in school, right? The brave navigator, the guy who discovered America and proved the world was round. He's often painted as the man who kicked off the modern age. But what if that whole story is a myth?
You know the rhyme. We all learned it. It's practically burned into our brains. And it makes the whole thing sound so simple, so clean. Just a neat, tidy little starting point for history. But the truth is rarely that simple. And it's almost never that neat.
What if that story of the hero is actually a carefully built facade? Something designed to cover up a much, much darker reality. Today, we're going to peel back those layers. We're going to look at the evidence and confront the devastating truth of what really happened when Columbus landed in the Americas.
All right, first things first, we need to completely reset the scene. The very phrase New World makes you think of an empty, untouched land, just waiting to be found. But the historical reality, backed up by tons of evidence, paints an entirely different picture.
Get this, before any European showed up, it's estimated that the Americas were home to somewhere between 75 and 100 million people. This wasn't some empty wilderness. This was a thriving, bustling hemisphere filled with huge cities, complex nations, and an incredible diversity of cultures. And just to put that number into perspective, that's not just a big number. The historian David E. Stannard points out that the population here was actually bigger than Europe and Russia combined at the time. So let's be clear, this wasn't the discovery of a new world, it was the invasion of an old one. Okay, so if he wasn't discovering an empty land, what was he actually doing there? To get to the bottom of that, we just have to look at his own words. His real motives were a far cry from pure exploration. You don't have to look much further than his own journals. It was this intense mix of greed and, frankly, religious fanaticism. Yeah, he was definitely looking for gold and spices and all the riches he could find. But he also saw himself as a divine agent, on a mission to fund a new crusade and convert everyone. And above all, his mission was crystal clear: take possession of any land he found for Spain. And this quote right here from his own logbook, it's just chilling. He lands on a shore surrounded by people, performs a little ceremony, and claims everything he can see for a king and queen an ocean away. And his excuse? Nobody objected. The sheer arrogance is staggering. This wasn't discovery. This was a hostile takeover.
You know, the words we use to tell these stories are incredibly important. Discovery sounds so peaceful, so innocent. It sanitizes the event. But conquest? That's a whole different story. That means taking control by force. And when you look at the evidence, there's no other word for it. It was a conquest.
And make no mistake, this wasn't just some political takeover. It was a conquest written in blood. The human price of Columbus's arrival was immediate, and it was absolutely catastrophic, especially for the indigenous people of the Caribbean. Just look at what happened on the island of Hispaniola, his first colony. The sheer speed of this catastrophe is, well, it's hard to even wrap your head around. We're talking about a population of 3 to 4 million Arawak people in 1492. 4 years later, it's down by 2/3. By 1516, just 12,000 are left, and by 1555, they were gone, functionally extinct. This was a complete and total genocide. And look, we don't have to guess what this was like. We have eyewitnesses. Bartolomé de las Casas was a Spanish priest who was there, and he saw it all. He wrote about the horror, saying his eyes had seen acts so far into human nature that he trembled just writing about them. This wasn't just random acts of cruelty. It was a system, a campaign of terror. The Spanish set impossible quotas for gold, and if people failed to meet them, their hands were cut off, and they were left to bleed to death. People were hunted for sport. This was the foundation they built their colony on. But here's the thing. The impact of Columbus goes way beyond the horrific events on those islands. What he did was create a blueprint, a model for exploitation that was copied and pasted across the world for the next 500 years. And this is the model, the playbook for colonialism that will be used for centuries. Step 1, seize the land and resources. Step 2, work the native population to death or kill them outright. Step 3, when you run out of local labor, start importing enslaved Africans. Step 4, build your empire's wealth on top of all that stolen land and forced labor. That's the system Columbus pioneered.
The historian John Henrik Clarke puts it perfectly. He said Columbus set in motion political forces that established a global system of exploitation. Think about that. The global inequality we see today,
the racial hierarchies, the entire idea of a first world and a third world. The roots of all of it can be traced right back to 1492. So, okay, this all happened over 500 years ago. Why are we talking about it now? Why does it still matter? Well, it matters because the stories we tell ourselves about our past define who we are in the present.
And that leads to a really big question, right? If all this evidence is out there in his own journals, in the accounts of eyewitnesses, why does the hero myth still exist? Why do we still have statues of him and a national holiday in his name? What purpose does that myth serve?
Well, according to historian Michael Wallace, this myth isn't just some innocent bedtime story. It actually does a political job. By hiding the brutal, violent origins of our world, it makes the inequalities we see today seem natural, inevitable, like that's just the way things are, instead of the direct result of a history of conquest.
So that really leaves us with the big question. How should we remember Christopher Columbus? As a hero? As a villain? Is it more complicated than that?
John Henrik Clarke offers a pretty radical idea. He says maybe we should have a Columbus Day, but it should be a justifiable day of mourning. A day to remember the millions upon millions of indigenous and African people who died in the Holocaust that he started. It's a provocative thought, and it forces us to choose. Do we want a history that makes us feel comfortable, or do we want a history that's true?